Hey there, y'alls. It's Dr. Edwards here. This time to, introduce you to Module 5, and in particular, Milestone 3, the last of the milestones. I want to start by giving you kind of a quick recap of, the milestones and, kind of what each includes, generally speaking. You can see the specific details in my previous announcements, but I'm doing this here to help you understand how things are connected and then play out in Milestone 3. Okay, so let me start. Milestone 1, your statement of purpose. And as I've tried to explain in my previous, support materials about Milestone 1, your statement of purpose is really just that. It's not actually research yet. It's what you would do if you were contracted to conduct an assessment of a problem. It's what you do if you were submitting a proposal to conduct research for an institution, agency, organization. It kind of covers both of those sides of the professional world, all right? And so milestone 1 is really just about outlining your problem, right? The background and specifics of it, particularly the impacts, right? Having a very focused and specific research question to investigate those impacts, right? Because you work back from the impacts. I think that's how you actually see your problem. And then you have your research value section, which is all about how what you will do, you haven't actually done it yet, how what you will do will be of value to Anthro and your area of concentration. Yeah, all right, so that's milestone 1. Just it gets the ball rolling, right? The real work begins in milestone 2. Starting with your application of theory, all right? You start with outlining your theories, their value, I mean, who came up with them, their value, and why they're well suited to analyzing your problem. Then you actually apply them, all right? And you again want to focus on the impacts here. You're explaining the how and the why of them through the unique theoretical perspectives that you're using, all right? In short, you're kind of working it backwards from the impacts. How did those things come about? That's the how and the why to explain your impacts. All right. And that then informs your literature review. All right. You have analyzed your problem to understand the how and the why of it, which then informs how you're going to go about solving it. All right. And this is where the lit review starts. Okay, so your lit review, I got to stress this, is not about reviewing your background sources. Not at all. All right. That's actually what you start milestone 1 with, right? Conducting background lit searching. All right. But here, this is not background stuff. This is very specific to solving your problem and finding evidence to support it. So you're actually looking for 2 types of sources. Sources that provide insights to make recommendations, as well as sources that provide evidence that those will actually work. All right. Now, and of course, those are specific to the impacts of your problem. That's how you resolve it, by focusing on the impacts that you now understand the how and the why of. Right. Right. And so the number of sources in your lit review are going to be relative to your problem, and in particular, the impacts of it. And yeah, and so you go find those sources, review them. All right. Don't let the cat out of the bag in terms of your review. You're not actually presenting your recommendations or the evidence there. No, you're just reviewing the source and highlighting the value of it. Right. You save the actual evidence for milestone 3. In fact, hopefully this makes sense. Your lit review was about 90% of the work of milestone 3 itself. All right. That's why it's absolutely critical to invest in that lit review, because you are going to be applying all of that in milestone 3. So let me now that I've kind of brought you up to the present, at milestone 3 after your lit review, I want to now focus on breaking it down and explaining how you go about it. So if you scroll on down, you will see my milestone 3 checklist outline. And yeah, this might seem overly simplistic, right? But this is really all you got to do. And I got to stress, you can only do this if you have invested, all right, in finding those very specific types of sources that are focused on resolving the impacts of your problem. Okay, without that, you're going to be shooting in the dark here. That's why I'm stressing absolutely essential, right, that you invest in that lit review. So, milestone 3. You start with a short intro recap of your problem, right, the impacts of it. We're talking a short paragraph here. It's just to remind your reader, all right? You left them in a lit review. Now you need to bring them back to the present. Okay. Uh, and so you start with a short little intro recapping your problem, significant impacts of it, because guess what? That is then what you are focusing the next several sections on. All right. And the section that follows that intro little recap is recommendations. Now, your recommendations are drawn from the sources you reviewed in your lit review, okay, which are very specific to solving the particular impacts of your problem. But remember, in your lit review, you were looking for two types of sources: those that offer insights to resolve the issue, as well as those that actually provide evidence that it'll work. And this is key, because there are two key sections here, one called recommendations, the other called projected success. Now, some students use an integrative approach here, and I'm fine with that. All right, it can be a very effective strategy. Other students prefer to keep these two sections separate. That really comes down to you, your wants, your needs. Regardless of which writing style you use, an integrative or separate approach, all the key things have to be there. All right, so it really comes down to you and how you want to do it. Regardless of that, you need to make specific targeted recommendations using your scholarly sources for Milestone 2 Lit Review to resolve the specific impacts of your problem. And this is literally just drawing on those sources that you reviewed, right? And you didn't actually outline the recs in your lit review. Rather, you highlighted the value, and now you're applying that here in Milestone 3 to make your recommendations, right? You just go one impact at a time. I might suggest using a bit of an upside down triangle approach: big issues to the small, tiny issues. It's a good strategy. Now, you got to back all that up. Those are just recs, all right? Those are, scholarly informed recommendations, all right, from the existing scholarship that's out there. But guess what? That isn't enough. You actually now have to back that up with actual evidence, all right? So, depending on what sort of writing style you want to use, an integrative or separated, um, if you're using an integrative here, you would make your recommendations, right? And then be presenting your focused evidence that that will actually be successful after it. Or you can keep them separated into two different sections. However, if you do the separated approach, which is I actually think is probably the most straightforward, you still need to make the connection, all right, that this is the evidence for that particular recommendation. Okay, which you do in your writing itself, evidence to support my recommendation, or the recommendation to address X, all right, is presented here, and and you present the evidence, and you cite it, of course. All right, and that's pretty regimented. Okay, like you're going run impact at a time, moving through them, biggest issue to the tiny minutia. All right. Don't get too lost in the tiny minutia. All right. Um, yeah. Okay. That should get you through the recommendations and projected success sections. Now we're on to the last two aspects of Milestone 3. And the first one is potential contributions. Now, back in Milestone 1, you had the other half of this section, and that was called research value. All right, last section of milestone one, and like there, you took time to outline the values that will come from your research, right, and how those contribute to anthropology in your area of concentration. Well, guess what you do here? This is the other bookend, if you would, right? Here, you explain that you did what you did, and as such, it contributes. All right. Uh, yeah, so a good strategy here is to look back at your research value section in milestone one. All right. And then seriously take time and look what you did, all right, in milestone two, because that's really where you're focused here. That's where you're doing all the things that you said you were going to do. Well, that in the start of milestone three, your recs and projected success. And now you can leverage those to support your points about how all of that contributes. All right. Um, that should be pretty clear cut. And you'll see in here, I have a link in my milestone three checklist outline. You'll see that I have an embedded link to the American Anthropological Association. This is a key resource, and there are others in my earlier announcements. I think all the way back in Mod 1, I shared links to our two primary professional organizations, the American Anthropological Association and the Society for Applied Anthropology. Now, in either of those organizations, you will find a document called Ethics and Professional Responsibilities. All right. And these are the rules that we have to live by as professional anthropologists. And you need to live by them as students. All right. And you want to be leveraging those professional standards and ethics in supporting like how this is contributing to these particular areas of concentration, subfields, stuff like that for the research contribution section. And you also want to leverage that for the ethical implications section of milestone three, the very last section. And this is all about, have you been ethical? All right. And so you want to start with the good stuff, right? You apply cultural relativism, checked your ethnocentrism, your inherent bias. Side note, objectivity is a myth. All observation is positioned from somewhere, but we do the best we can. Okay. You don't need to go into the finer details of that. I just got to say it. But going back to the ethics and professional responsibilities for anthropologists, right? The number one thing is do no harm. That is like our Hippocratic oath, right? As anthropologists, just like his medical doctors, they have the Hippocratic oath. Says the same thing: do no harm. And so you have to account for that here. All right. You start with how you've taken steps to, be culturally relative, check your ethnicism, your inherent bias, focus, you have an objective focus, a holistic focus, right? That's all the positive, right? To try to minimize any potential harmful impacts. Okay. Now, no matter how hard you try, um, that's never guaranteed. All right. There is always the potential that your research can do harm. There's no arguing it. Okay. And so what I suggest for kind of like the second half of this ethical implication section is that you focus on how it can be used to do harm. All right. And outline some solid ideas on how to minimize that. Shouldn't be too hard. All right. I like to suggest, you'll see in the milestone three checklist outline here, like imagine there is an evil anthropologist, bent on using your research to do harm, and that'll help kind of get your mind in the right place. I know it's completely, fictional. Right? Like this is it's not real, but it helps you think about where you want to be thinking. You don't literally write, if there was an evil anthropological mastermind out there. No. But let me give you some examples of some pretty horrific things that have happened from people in their research. Here's a great one. Some of you, well, at least one of you in this class, if I remember right, is focused on the Yanomami and has encountered the work of Napoleon Chagnon. All right, he's infamous. Look him up. And Napoleon Chagnon worked extensively with the Yanomamo/Yanomami of Brazil and surrounding areas. And he did some pretty egregious things, and people have been arguing about it ever since. In particular, he kind of created and perpetuated this myth of the Yanomami as being the fierce people. All right. And he wrote extensively about it. And through that, he literally created a social construction of what the Yanomami are. And guess what? They are not what he described. All right. And that has real world impacts for the Yanomami and everyone else that has tried to study them. Because guess what? Napoleon Chagnon was one of the first key contributors to all that. So everyone then looks at his work and they're like, oh yeah, so they're this, they're that, this is how they do these things, all that. And guess what? None of it holds up. People went and did subsequent research with the Yanomami, and they came across that none of that stuff exists. That was all in Chagnon's head, if you would. Yeah, that's one example. Here's another one. My own research. I work with folks that are often labeled as poachers. If the names of them were to be revealed or identifying information, they would be spending the rest of their life in prison, if not executed. All right. That's some real harm that can come from my research. And guess what? I have to be incredibly careful to ensure that does not happen. All right. Back in my in the theory resources, there's one in there by H. Russell Bernard, and he's kind of like the be all end all when it comes to methodologies and data collection techniques and stuff. You can look him up. And he's great for insights here about like how you minimize those impacts, those potential harms. And using my own research as an example, I have to use pseudonyms and make sure that there is no identifying information. All site places, I change the names. All actors, I change the names. In fact, I have intentionally set it up in my research that it looks like I'm actually working someplace else. So if somebody were to try to go dig up that stuff, they would never find it. I also am obligated to destroy my notes in case somebody were to recover those. Guess what? Those are my raw field notes. And if somebody had those, oof, the things they could do with it. Yeah, by the way, that really underscores the sort of trust and rapport you have to develop with the people that you work with. In so many ways, they're sharing secrets. And you have to respect that, and you have to protect their confidentiality. To be clear, that's a quick overview of it. Further down the line, if you pursue anthropology, you'd end up going through institutional review if you were to go do field work. And part of that includes something called human subjects approval, where you literally have to outline all the protocols of how you will interact and engage with others and what you will do if bad things happen. And it's a very comprehensive document, and you have to live by it. It's usually essential to funding opportunities. You have to be vetted, if you would, that you have the skills to do such. And that is assessed through the various protocols you develop to address any potential harmful act that can come from your research. Anyway, I think that about covers it. I mean, this is the home stretch, y'alls. The only other thing after Milestone 3 is, well, you got your final submission. And that's kind of two key pieces. You got your white paper, which is assembling all 3 milestones, putting them together, All right. Single cover page, table of contents, abstract, standard APA formatting. All right. Start to end, polish it, make it pretty. And then the other aspect of your final submission is a presentation. So let me spend a few minutes talking about that here. So for your presentation, you'll see in the rubric and stuff that it's supposed to be a professional presentation. However, keep your audience in mind. Your audience here is not a specialized audience, it's the general public. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. You do not want to bore or talk over the heads of your audience. That doesn't mean dumbing things down. That just means tailoring your approach to fit your audience. Okay. So I generally suggest following the same basic section headings you have used in your capstone project itself. All right, you got your intro, you got your background, you got your research question, from all the way to the end, recs, projected success, yada yada. Now, you definitely don't want to include all of them or necessarily go into each in extreme depth. Okay, and this is key for the sections of Milestone 2 in particular. Right, I would definitely suggest using the sections of Milestone 1, simplifying the sections of Milestone 2. For example, you would identify the theory that you used, all right, highlight its value, but not go into your analysis. Rather, you would just highlight key points of your analysis, because anything more than that is, you're going to lose your audience. They're like, what is this theory stuff? I don't get this theory stuff. They're going to be like you when you first, wrapped your brain around theory. Okay. And just remember where you were at with that. Imagine how your audience is going to be. Okay. So you want to streamline it here. It's not the primary focus. Rather, the insights that came from your analysis, those are the key things you want to highlight here. And you would not present your literature review. That's largely an academic exercise for you to gather the key sources you need to write Milestone 3. All right. So for Milestone 2 sections, you would include, just highlight the theory you used, right? Why it's of value, and then highlight the key points of your analysis. Then that gets you to your recommendations and projected success. And you present that. And then you'd follow up with the research contributions and the ethical implications. Your references cited as well, and separate any image citations. Those go in another list, right, from the actual academic scholarly sources you used in writing your presentation. This may sound oxymoronic, but I want you to have fun with it, right? This is your chance to show off your research, all right? Generally speaking, avoid heavy text in your slides, right? You don't want that. Rather, all of those, you explaining things and making connections, those go in your speaker's notes, all right? And you actually have an option here. You can record audio, all right, your complete narrative to go with your presentation, or you can include speaker's notes. Frankly, I would recommend just speaker's notes. There's fewer things to go sideways, right? And I have a particular strategy that's going to help you with it. All the details are in your white paper, all right? So you're not going to be starting from scratch for writing your speaker's notes, your narrative, all right, for your presentation. No, you got all the details in Milestone. I mean, in your final white paper. So guess what? You focus on making nice, pretty, polished slides that use bullet points, not heavy text, right? And then you cut and paste the details of those bullet points from your white paper and slap them into the notes section underneath each slide. It works great. It's what I do all the time. Yeah. And guess what? All the citations are there. you can't miss. And I just, recording audio can be a good strategy too, particularly if you want to practice, public speaking, stuff like that. I welcome it. But I don't want you to stress over it either. All right. So if you're feeling stressed, don't worry about doing full audio recording for each slide. Rather, just focus on doing speakers notes and use the strategy that I outlined of bullet points with minimal text. They're just bullet points. All right. Use lots of images. They help tell your story. And then all the details of the things that you're presenting in the slide go in your speaker's notes underneath it, right? And I suggest using PowerPoint here. It is tried and true. You actually have immediate access to it through Office 365, which you can access through your new webmail account. It's on the left-hand side of it. All right. I will leave it at that. And of course, don't hesitate with any questions. I'm here for any and everything. And, everything's downhill from here. All right. You got this. All right, y'all. Have a great one. Catch you on the flip side. Take care.